When my children finally came back home, I did not run to the door. I did not cry. I did not shout. I just stood there, holding the edge of the kitchen table, and waited for my heart to calm down. For years, this house had been too quiet, too clean, too still. There were no shoes by the door, no laughter in the hallway, no loud voices arguing over small things that did not matter, just silence. And silence can be very heavy when you are alone. I used to imagine this moment so many times. I would picture them knocking. I would picture myself opening the door. Maybe I would cry. Maybe they would say, "Mom, we're sorry." But when the moment really came, none of those words happened. The doorbell rang once, soft, almost unsure. I knew it was them. A mother always knows. I wiped my hands on my apron. Even though they were not wet, I walked slowly to the door. Each step felt like walking through deep water. When I opened it, there they were, my son, my daughter, standing on the porch where they used to wait for the school bus. But now they looked older, tired, and unsure. For a second, nobody spoke. The wind moved past us, carrying dust from the road, carrying years of distance. And in that moment, I realized something very painful. They had left this house as angry children, but they had come back as strangers. It was not always like this. There was a time when this house was full of noise, full of life. I raised my children in this very kitchen. The walls still remember their fingerprints. The floor still carries small scratches from toy cars and chair legs. My husband built this house with his own hands. He used to say, "This place will keep our family together." Back then, I believed him. My son, Armin, was always serious. Even as a little boy, he thought deeply about things. He would sit at the table, staring at his homework, biting his pencil, trying to understand the world. My daughter, Sana, was different. She laughed easily. She talked nonstop. She would run into the kitchen and hug me from behind while I was cooking. "Emmy, what are we eating?" she would ask every single day. And every single day, I would say, "Food, if you wait, you will see." Those were simple days. Money was not always enough, but love felt enough. We ate together every night. No phones at the table. No rushing. Just us. I used to look at them and think, when they grow up, they will understand everything I did for them. I was wrong. The distance did not happen in one day. It never does. It begins quietly, like a small crack in glass. You do not notice it at first, but slowly, it spreads. Armin was the first to change. When he entered university, he started coming home later. He stopped telling me about his day. If I asked, "How was class?" he would say, "Fine." Just one word. Like a closed door. Sana followed him. She made new friends, new habits, new ideas. And suddenly, my advice felt old to them. "Times are different now, Amy," she would say gently. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was still living in the past. But I never stopped caring. I only wanted them safe. I only wanted them close. I did not know that sometimes holding too tightly can push people away. After my husband passed away, everything changed faster. The house became quieter. Even when the children were still living there, grief sat with us at the dinner table. It slept in every room. I tried to stay strong for them, but strength can look like control, and control can feel like pressure. I started worrying more. Where are you going? When will you come back? Who are you with? Maybe I asked too many questions. Maybe I forgot that they were no longer small. One evening, Armin looked at me and said, "Amy, I need space." Space. That word hurt more than shouting would have. Space in the house his father built. Space from the woman who gave him life. But I nodded, because what else could I do? The day they left was not dramatic. There was no screaming, no broken plates, just cold words. Armin had received a job offer in another city. A big opportunity. Sana decided to move with him. She said she wanted independence. I packed their bags quietly. I folded their clothes the same way I always had. Neatly, carefully. When they carried the last suitcase to the door, I thought they would hesitate. They did not. Don't worry, Amy, Sana said softly. We'll visit. Armin avoided my eyes. The door closed. And just like that, my house became an empty shell. And now, after years of silence, after months when the phone did not ring, after birthdays celebrated alone, they were back, standing on my porch. Older, quieter, and I could see something in their eyes. Regret. But regret does not erase time. I stepped aside. Come in, I said calmly. My voice did not shake, but inside, my heart was trembling like a leaf in the wind. When they stepped inside, the house felt different. Not warmer, not happier, just aware, as if the walls were listening. Armin placed his small suitcase near the door. Sana looked around slowly, like she was visiting someone else's home. Nothing had changed. The same curtains, the same clock ticking above the doorway, the same family photo hanging on the wall. But time had changed us. Sit, I said gently. They walked into the living room and sat on the edge of the sofa. The same sofa they used to jump on as children. For a moment, nobody spoke. The silence was not angry. It was heavy. I went to the kitchen. My hands moved by habit. I boiled water, took out 3 cups. Tea has always been my way of holding things together. When I came back, I placed the cups on the table. Sana wrapped her fingers around hers. Armin stared into the steam rising from his. I hope you're well, Amy, he said finally. I am, I answered. It was not a lie, but it was not the full truth either. The first months after they left were the hardest. I would wake up early, out of habit. I would prepare breakfast for 3 people. Then I would stand there, looking at 3 plates. Slowly, I stopped cooking so much. 1 plate is easier to manage, but it also reminds you that you are alone. Sometimes I would sit in Armin's old room. I did not clean it for a long time. His books were still on the shelf, his old jacket hanging behind the door. I would touch the fabric and whisper, "Are you eating properly?" There was no answer. Sana called sometimes in the beginning. Her voice sounded excited. "Amy, the city is so big," she would say. "You would not believe the buildings here." I would smile into the phone. "I am happy for you." And I meant it. But after a few months, the calls became shorter, then less frequent, then rare. I do not think my children meant to forget me. Life can be loud. Work, friends, new dreams. Parents become background noise. We stay where we always were, waiting. There were times I wanted to call them and say, "Why do you not visit?" But I stopped myself. I did not want to sound needy. I did not want to be a burden. So, instead, I would say, "Everything is fine here," even when it was not. The first birthday I spent alone felt strange. I did not tell them it was my birthday. I told myself they were busy. That night, I cut a small slice of cake by myself. I lit 1 candle, not for my age, just for hope. I closed my eyes and made a wish. I wish my children remember home. The candle flickered, then went out. But something else changed during those years. Something inside me. The loneliness was painful at first, but slowly, it became quiet strength. I started walking in the mornings. I joined a small reading group at the local community center. I planted flowers in the garden. For the first time in many years, I had long hours that belonged only to me. At first, I did not know what to do with that time. I had spent my whole life taking care of someone else. My husband, my children. When they were gone, I felt useless. But I was not useless. I was just unused to being alone. Little by little, I learned to sit with myself, to drink tea without rushing, to watch the sunset without waiting for someone to come home. It was not happiness, but it was peace. Armin cleared his throat. "We should have come earlier," he said quietly. I looked at him. His hair had small lines of gray near his temples. He looked tired. Life had not been as easy as he once thought. Sana's eyes were red, maybe from crying, maybe from lack of sleep. I did not ask yet. Sometimes questions can wait. "You must be hungry," I said instead. They both nodded. In the kitchen, I began preparing dinner. Rice, lentils, the same simple food they grew up eating. Sana came to stand beside me. For a moment, we moved around each other like we used to. She reached for the salt without asking where it was. Some habits never disappear. "Amy," she started, then stopped. "Yes, I miss this kitchen." I did not answer right away, because I did not know if she missed the kitchen or the comfort it gave her. That night, we sat at the table together, 3 plates again, the same table that had once felt too big for one person. But something was different now. They did not talk much. They looked at each other as if silently deciding who would speak first. Finally, Armin said, "Things did not go the way we expected." I listened. I did not interrupt. He told me about his job. At first, it was good. High salary, big office. But slowly, the pressure grew. Long hours, constant competition. The company downsized last year. He was one of the first to be let go. Sana tried to support herself with small projects. But the city was expensive. Rent increased. Savings disappeared. And pride kept them from telling me. "We didn't want you to worry," Sana said softly. I almost smiled. Mothers always worry. Distance does not stop that. "I see," I said calmly. And I did see. Life had humbled them. But I also saw something else. They were not just here because of money. There was shame in their posture, regret in their silence. Armin looked at me and said, "Amy, we were not good to you." The words hung in the air, simple, heavy. I felt a small ache in my chest. Not sharp, just deep. "You were young," I answered quietly. But that was not the whole story. Because youth explains mistakes, it does not erase neglect. That night, after they went to their old rooms, I stayed awake. I sat by the window. The moonlight touched the garden, the same garden I had cared for alone. I asked myself a difficult question. Were they home because they needed shelter? Or were they home because they understood something now? The difference matters. Because forgiveness is easy when people change, but much harder when they only need something. I did not want to feel used. I did not want to reopen my heart just to have it emptied again. Still, they were my children, and love does not disappear. It just waits. The next morning, I woke early, out of habit, but this time, I heard movement in the house, footsteps, a door opening, water running in the bathroom. For a moment, it felt like the old days. I made breakfast. When Armin entered the kitchen, he hesitated. "Can I help?" he asked. The question surprised me. He had never asked that before. "Yes," I said slowly. "You can cut the bread." He smiled faintly, and I saw a glimpse of the boy he used to be. But rebuilding trust is not done in one breakfast. It takes time, and honesty, and patience. I did not know yet if we had all 3. As the days passed, they stayed. They cleaned their rooms. They helped in small ways. But we still walked carefully around each other, like people crossing a thin bridge. Nobody wanted to fall into old misunderstandings. The real test had not come yet. Because living together again means facing old wounds, and some wounds never fully healed. Living together again was not as simple as I hoped. At first, everything felt polite. Too polite. Good morning. Thank you. Do you need anything? We spoke like guests sharing the same house, not like family. And sometimes that hurt more because strangers are careful. But family should be comfortable. After the first week, small cracks began to show. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic, just small things. Armin would sit at the table with his phone for hours, searching for jobs. His face would grow tight when he read something disappointing. Sana tried to stay cheerful. She cleaned. She cooked sometimes. She even rearranged the living room one afternoon. When I walked in and saw the chairs moved, I froze. Why did you change it? I asked gently. It feels more modern this way, she replied. Modern. That word again. I looked at the space where your father's old armchair used to sit. She had moved it near the window. I nodded. It's fine, I said. But inside, something felt disturbed. That chair had not moved in 20 years. It was not just furniture. It was memory. The first real misunderstanding came quietly. I had saved some money over the years. Not much, just enough to feel secure. One evening, I overheard Armin and Sana talking in low voices in the hallway. We cannot stay here forever, Armin said. I know, Sana replied. But we need time. Time. I stood behind the kitchen door, listening. I don't want to depend on her, Armin continued. Depend on me. The words stung. Had I become a burden, even in my own house? Or was he ashamed to need me? I stepped into the hallway so they would not think I was hiding. You can stay as long as you need, I said calmly. They both turned quickly. We didn't mean, Sana started. I know, I said softly, but I was not sure if I truly did. Over the next few days, tension moved through the house like quiet wind. Invisible, but present. Armin became restless. He would leave early for interviews, return late, sometimes silent, sometimes frustrated. This country has no opportunity, he muttered one night. I remembered when he said the same thing years ago. That was one reason he left. Now he sounded tired. Sana, on the other hand, started asking questions about the house. Have you thought about renovating? You could rent the extra room, maybe sell part of the land. Each suggestion felt practical, reasonable, but they made my chest feel tight. Sell part of the land their father worked so hard to buy? This house is not for selling, I said quietly one afternoon. Sana sighed. I'm just thinking about the future, Amy. So am I answered. But maybe our ideas of the future were different. That evening, I went to the garden alone. The sky was turning orange. The flowers I planted during my lonely years were blooming. They did not ask for much, just water, just light. I realized something painful then. While my children were building new lives far away, I had built a life here too, a quiet one, but mine. If they stayed, would I lose that peace? Was I ready to open my world again? Love is not only about giving. Sometimes it is also about protecting yourself. A few days later, the real argument happened. Not shouting, but sharp enough to leave marks. It began with something small. Dinner. I had cooked a simple meal. Armin barely touched his food. Is something wrong? I asked gently. He hesitated. I'm used to different food now. Different food. I felt embarrassed suddenly, as if my cooking had become old-fashioned. Sana tried to help. He just means city food, Amy. It's nothing. But Armin added quietly, maybe we should change some things here. Change. That word again. What things? I asked. The way we live, he replied. And what is wrong with the way we live? I asked calmly. He looked frustrated. Amy, everything is the same as it was 10 years ago. Yes, I said, because this is my home. Silence filled the room, thick, heavy. Armin pushed his plate slightly away. I feel like I came back in time. The words were not meant to hurt, but they did. I put down my spoon carefully. I did not ask you to come back, I said softly. The room froze. Sana looked between us. That's not fair, she whispered. No, I agreed. It is not. I stood up and began collecting plates. Not angrily, just slowly. I kept this house standing when you both left, I continued. I kept the memories safe. I kept your rooms untouched. I kept waiting. My voice did not rise, but my heart felt exposed. You speak of change, but you were not here to see what staying required. Armin's eyes softened, but pride still sat on his shoulders. We were trying to build something, he said, and I was trying to hold something together, I replied. That night, no one slept easily. I heard Armin pacing in his room. Sana cried quietly, and I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Maybe we were all right, and maybe we were all wrong. They left to find independence. I stayed to preserve stability. Neither path was easy, but now those two paths were colliding under one roof, and the house felt smaller because of it. The next morning, Armin knocked gently on my bedroom door. Can we talk? He asked. I nodded. He sat at the edge of my bed like he used to when he was small. I'm not angry at you, he said. I know, I replied. I'm angry at myself, he continued, for thinking life would be simple, for leaving the way I did. His voice trembled slightly. I thought you were controlling, he admitted. But maybe you were just afraid to lose us. I felt tears form, but I kept my voice steady. I was afraid, I said honestly. After your father died, you were all I had. He looked down, and we thought you were holding us back. There it was, the truth, painful, but real. Sometimes children do not see fear. They only see rules. Sometimes parents do not see dreams. They only see danger. We had misunderstood each other for years, not because we did not love each other, but because we did not speak honestly. And silence can grow walls higher than anger ever could. Sana entered slowly. I was scared too, she said softly. Scared that if I stayed, I would never become independent. She sat beside her brother. I thought leaving meant strength. I looked at both of them. And what does coming back mean? I asked gently. Neither of them answered immediately, because maybe they did not know yet. In that quiet room, I understood something important. This was not just about money, not just about jobs, not even about pride. This was about identity. They wanted to prove they could survive without me, and I wanted proof that I was still needed. Both desires were human, but they had pulled us apart. And now, they were pulling us into something uncertain. Because forgiveness requires more than words. It requires change. Real change. And I was not sure yet. Who would change first? After that conversation in my bedroom, something changed. Not outside. Outside, the house looked the same. But inside, the air felt thinner. We had finally spoken truth. And truth, even when gentle, can shake old foundations. For a few days, everyone tried harder. Armin helped in the garden. Sana cooked dinner without being asked. I noticed their efforts, and I appreciated them. But effort does not erase history overnight. There were still pauses in conversation, still careful words. Still moments when I caught them whispering together, not against me, just unsure of me. And I realized something painful. They did not know who I had become in their absence. To them, I was still the same worried mother, the same strict voice. They had not seen the woman who learned to sit alone with silence. They had not seen the nights I cried quietly and still woke up strong. They had missed my growth, and I had missed theirs. One afternoon, while cleaning a drawer, I found an old envelope. Inside were letters. Letters Armin used to write from university. Short notes. Emmy, I passed my exam. Emmy, I miss your cooking. Emmy, pray for me. I sat on the sofa and read them slowly. Each word felt warmer than the present. Sana walked in and saw the papers in my hands. You kept those? She asked softly. I kept everything, I replied. She sat beside me. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she whispered, we didn't know you felt so alone. I looked at her gently. You didn't ask. Her eyes filled with tears. And in that small space between us, years of distance stood quietly. That evening, Armin received a phone call. I saw his face change while he listened. Hope first, then disappointment. He ended the call slowly. They hired someone else, he said. He tried to sound calm, but his shoulders dropped. Sana put her hand on his arm. It's okay, she whispered. But it was not okay. Not really, because each rejection was not just about work. It was about pride, about the life he thought he deserved. I wanted to comfort him, but I did not know how without sounding like the old controlling mother. So I simply said, you will find your path. He nodded, but I could see doubt in his eyes. That night, I opened my small wooden box. Inside was the money I had saved over the years. Carefully folded bills, emergency savings, security. I counted it slowly. It was not a fortune, but it was enough to help. I closed the box and sat quietly. If I offered this money, would it heal something? Or would it create more dependence? Would they see it as love or as control? I did not want to buy their closeness. I wanted it to be real. The real turning point came 2 days later. Unexpected, quiet, but strong enough to change everything. It was late afternoon. Sana and I were folding laundry together. The house felt calm, almost peaceful. Then Armin entered the room, holding papers in his hand. I've decided something, he said. His voice was steady, but too steady. What is it? I asked. I got an offer, he said. Not here, in another country. The air stopped moving. Sana looked up sharply. Another country? Yes, he replied. It's a contract job, not permanent, but it's good money. I felt my fingers tighten around the fabric I was holding. How long? I asked. 2 years. 2 years. Again, the word echoed in my chest. And when would you leave? I asked quietly. In a month. A month. So soon. I looked at him carefully. And what about this house? I asked. I thought, maybe we could sell it, he said gently. Sell it. There it was. The fear I had tried to ignore. This place is too big for you alone, he continued. You could move somewhere smaller, more modern, easier. Sana was silent, watching us both. I stood slowly. This house is not just walls, I said calmly. It is your father's work. It is your childhood. It is my life. I know, he replied. But we have to move forward. Forward, as if staying meant standing still. Do you want me to leave my home? I asked gently. No, he said quickly. Not leave. Just adjust. Adjust. The same word he once used when he wanted space. I felt something settle inside me then. Not anger, clarity. For years, I had adjusted. Adjusted my sleep. Adjusted my worries. Adjusted my loneliness. But this house was the one thing I did not adjust. Because it held my memories safe. I will not sell this house, I said quietly. The room became very still. Armin's jaw tightened. You're choosing bricks over your son, he asked. The question was sharp, but my voice remained soft. I am choosing stability over fear, I answered. He looked hurt, maybe even betrayed. Sana stood up. Please, she said. Let's not fight. I am not fighting, I said calmly. I am setting a boundary. The word surprised even me. Boundary. I had never used that word before, not in my life. But during my lonely years, I had learned something important. Love without boundaries becomes sacrifice, and sacrifice without respect becomes pain. I will support you, I continued, but I will not erase my life to make yours easier. Armin stared at me, as if seeing me for the first time. You've changed, he said slowly. Yes, I replied. I have. He left the room without another word. The door did not slam. It closed gently, but the distance between us felt wide again. Sana sat down slowly. Amy, maybe he's just scared, she whispered. I know, I said. And so am I. We sat there quietly, two women, two generations, both afraid of losing something. That night, Armin did not come to dinner. He stayed in his room. I placed a plate outside his door, like I used to when he studied late. Old habits return when hearts are hurting. Later, I heard him open the door. The plate was empty in the morning, but he did not speak. And sometimes silence after truth is louder than shouting. The next morning, I stood in the garden before sunrise. The sky was pale, the air cool. I thought about everything, about motherhood, about letting go, about holding on. Children believe leaving makes them strong. Parents believe staying makes them strong. Maybe strength is not in leaving or staying. Maybe it is in respecting each other's path. For the first time, I realized something clearly. If Armin left again, it would not break me, because I had survived once, and I had grown. But I also understood something else. If he left with resentment in his heart, that would break us both. When he finally came outside, his eyes were red. He had not slept well. Neither had I. He stood beside me quietly. I don't want to fight you, he said. I don't want to fight either, I replied. He looked at the house, at the garden, at the morning light touching the roof. I was so sure leaving was the only way to prove myself, he said slowly. And now I'm not sure of anything. I turned to him gently. You do not have to prove your worth by running, I said. And I do not have to prove my love by giving up everything. We stood there in silence, not healed, not fully understanding each other, but closer to truth than we had been in years. Should try building something here. I studied his face. Are you choosing this, or avoiding fear? I asked gently. He hesitated. I don't know. Honesty. At last. I will support whichever path you choose, I said softly. But choose it because it gives you peace, not because it protects your pride. He nodded slowly, and for the first time in years, I felt like we were speaking as two adults, not as mother and child. 2 days later, something unexpected happened. A neighbor came by, Mrs. Farida. She had watched my children grow up. She greeted Armin warmly. Oh, you finally came home, she said with a gentle smile. The word finally hung in the air. Armin looked embarrassed. Yes, he replied quietly. After she left, he turned to me. Did people talk? He asked. About what? I said. About us leaving you alone. I did not answer immediately, because yes, they had talked, not cruelly, but curiously. Neighbors notice empty houses. They notice aging parents living alone. They asked questions, I admitted gently. And what did you say? He pressed. I said my children are building their lives. He looked down. And were you angry when you said that? No, I answered honestly. I was proud. His eyes filled suddenly, and I saw the hidden wound. He had believed I resented him. He had carried guilt silently, while I had carried loneliness silently. 2 pains, unspoken, growing in separate rooms. Later that night, Sana sat beside me on the sofa. I used to think you didn't understand my dreams, she whispered. And now, I asked, now I think maybe I didn't understand your sacrifices. Her words were soft, but heavy. You wanted freedom, I said gently. Yes, and I wanted safety for you. She nodded. I thought safety meant control, she admitted. And I thought freedom meant danger, I replied. We both smiled faintly, two women seeing each other clearly for the first time. The contract deadline approached. 3 days left to accept or decline. Armin looked calmer, not relaxed, but thoughtful. He spent more time in the garden. He repaired a broken fence. He cleaned the old storage room. Small actions, but meaningful. One afternoon, he sat with me on the steps outside. I realized something, he said. What? I asked. I was angry at you for being afraid, but I never admitted I was afraid too. Afraid of what? I asked softly. Of failing here, of people seeing me struggle, of not being impressive. His honesty felt like sunlight. Failure does not make you small, I said. It makes you human. He let out a slow breath. For years I thought coming home meant defeat. And now, I asked, now I think it might mean courage. Those words, they healed something deep inside me. That evening, Armin sent an email. He declined the foreign offer. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a simple message. He closed the laptop and looked at me. I'm staying, he said. I nodded. I did not clap. I did not cry, because this was not victory. It was responsibility. Sana hugged him tightly, and for the first time since they returned, the house felt warmer. Not perfect, but warmer. But staying was only the beginning, because staying means rebuilding, and rebuilding requires effort from everyone, including me. I could not return to my old habits of control, and they could not return to their old habits of avoidance. We had chosen each other again. Now we had to prove it. After Armin declined the job offer, the house felt different. Not because everything was solved, but because a decision had been made. Uncertainty is heavier than difficulty. At least now, we knew we were trying. The first week after his decision was quiet, almost peaceful. Armin began searching for work locally, not the kind with big titles or high salaries, just honest work. He accepted small projects at first, freelance tasks, consulting for a local company. It was not glamorous, but it was steady, and I noticed something in him. He no longer rushed out of the house as if escaping. He walked out calmly, and he returned before sunset. That simple change filled the house with something warm. Sana began waking up early, earlier than I expected. One morning, I entered the kitchen and found her already making tea. You're up early, I said. She smiled. I used to complain about mornings here, she admitted. Now they feel peaceful. We stood side by side, pouring tea into cups. No tension, no heavy silence, just quiet companionship. Emmy, she said softly, can you teach me how you manage the house budget? The question surprised me. You want to learn? I asked gently. Yes, I think I need to understand stability better. I nodded slowly, and that day, for the first time, I opened my wooden savings box in front of her. Not as control, not as secrecy, but as sharing. I explained how I saved little by little, how I avoided debt, how I kept emergency funds, not because I was fearful, but because I believed peace begins with preparation. Sana listened carefully. She wrote notes, and as she did, I realized something. She was no longer the girl running toward freedom without looking back. She was becoming a woman who understood balance. Dinner became our anchor. No phones, no rushing, just simple food and simple conversation. Armin began asking about my reading group. Sana talked about ideas for starting a small local business. One evening, Armin said quietly, "I used to think success meant leaving this place. And now I think success might mean improving it." I did not respond immediately because my heart felt full. Not proud in a loud way, just steady. But living together again was not perfect. There were still moments of friction. One afternoon, I noticed Armin rearranging papers on the living room shelf. He had removed some old items to make space. I felt the old tightening in my chest. "Why move that?" I asked. He paused. "I thought we could organize things better." I almost reacted defensively. Almost. But I stopped. Instead, I said gently, "Let's decide together." He smiled faintly. Yes, or together. Such a small word. But it carried weight. We were learning something new. Not obedience, not authority, but partnership. The garden became our meeting place. In the evenings, we would sit outside, sometimes talking, sometimes just listening to the wind. One evening, Sana said, "I used to feel embarrassed telling people I was from a small town." I looked at her quietly. "And now?" I asked. "Now I feel lucky." Armin nodded. "We were chasing noise," he said, "and we forgot the value of quiet." I watched them carefully. Their faces no longer looked ashamed. They looked grounded, and that gave me peace. But healing also requires facing uncomfortable truths. One night, while washing dishes, Sana said softly, "Amy, were you ever angry at us?" I dried my hands slowly. "Yes," I answered honestly. She looked startled. "But I never stopped loving you." She nodded. "I think we mistook your fear for control. And I mistook your independence for rejection," I admitted. We stood there quietly. No tears, just understanding. Sometimes clarity is more powerful than apology. A week later, Armin brought home small groceries. Without being asked, he placed them on the table. "For the house," he said simply. It was not about the money. It was about intention. That night, as we ate, I realized something important. My children were not ungrateful. They were inexperienced. They had needed to leave to understand. And I had needed to let them leave to grow. We had all been learning separately. Now we were learning together. But just when everything began to feel steady, life prepared another test. Because rebuilding trust is one thing, building a shared future is another. And soon, a financial difficulty would challenge all of us. Not because we lacked love, but because love must also survive pressure. That night, as I watched them talk quietly in the living room, I felt something deep in my chest. Not fear, not anxiety, gratitude. They had come back, not perfectly, not proudly, but sincerely. And sometimes sincerity is enough to begin again. Just when peace began to feel real, life reminded us that calm days do not last forever. It started with a letter, a simple envelope placed under the gate. White official, unfriendly. I picked it up on my way back from the garden. At first, I did not think much of it. But when I opened it, my hands grew cold. Property tax revision. The local council had increased rates. Not slightly, significantly. I read the numbers twice, then 3 times. The amount was not impossible, but it was heavy. Especially now. Armin was still earning small income. Sana's ideas were still plans. And my savings, though careful, were not endless. I folded the paper slowly. For years, I had managed quietly, but this was different. This was pressure from outside, and outside pressure tests inside strength. That evening, I placed the letter on the dining table. Armin read it first. His face tightened. "That's a lot," he said. Sana leaned closer. "Can we appeal?" she asked. "Maybe," Armin replied. "But it will take time." Silence settled. Not the old kind filled with resentment, but a new kind filled with calculation, responsibility. I watched them carefully. Years ago, they would have said, "Sell the house." Now they did not. That difference meant something. "We can use some savings," I said calmly. Both of them looked at me immediately. "No," Armin said quickly. "We'll figure it out." His voice was firm, not defensive, protective. I felt something shift inside me. He was no longer trying to escape responsibility. He was stepping toward it. For the next few days, the house felt focused. Armin worked longer hours. He contacted old colleagues. He searched for contracts, not in distant cities, but nearby. Sana began calculating budgets carefully. She suggested cutting unnecessary expenses. She even paused her small business plans for now. "We'll start when things stabilize," she said quietly. I watched them both, carrying weight, together, and I realized something. This was the first real problem we were facing as a united family, not as scattered individuals, but as one roof. One evening, Armin came home exhausted. He sat down heavily at the table. "I got a short-term consulting contract," he said. "It's not huge, but it's steady for 3 months. Sana smiled with relief. "That's good." He nodded. "But it's intense. Long hours." I saw the old shadow pass over his face. The memory of burnout. I placed my hand gently on his. "Do not lose yourself again," I said softly. He looked at me. "This time is different," he replied. "I'm not running. I'm building." That night, when everyone slept, I opened my wooden box again. I counted my savings slowly. The numbers look smaller now, fragile. For a moment, fear whispered in my ear. What if this continues? What if another letter comes? What if Armin's contract ends? I closed my eyes. For years, I had carried financial fear alone. Now I could share it. But old habits are strong. I still wanted to protect them from worry. Then I remembered what I had told Armin. Love without boundaries becomes sacrifice. And I understood something clearly. I could not solve everything silently anymore. We had to face it together. The next morning, I placed my savings box on the table. Both of them looked surprised. "This is what we have," I said. "No secrets." Armin stared at the money. "You shouldn't have to use this," he said quietly. "I don't have to," I replied. "But I choose to share responsibility." Sana's eyes filled. "For years you handled everything alone," she whispered. "Yes," I said softly. "And that was my mistake too." They looked confused. "I didn't teach you enough about struggle," I continued. "I tried to shield you from every worry." Armin shook his head gently. "No, we chose not to see. Just when we thought we had a plan." Another problem arrived. The roof. After heavy rain, water began dripping slowly into the hallway. Not dramatic, just steady. Drop, drop, drop. Armin climbed up to inspect it. When he came down, his face was serious. "The tiles are old," he said. "It needs proper repair, not patchwork." "And how much?" Sana asked carefully. He named the amount. It was almost the same as the tax increase. For a moment, no one spoke. Life was testing us, not cruelly, but persistently. I expected frustration. I expected someone to say, "This is too much." But instead, Armin took a deep breath. "Okay," he said calmly. "We handle one thing at a time." Sana nodded. "We prioritize the roof. We can negotiate the tax payment in installments." They began discussing practical steps, calling contractors, comparing prices, making lists. And as I watched them, I felt something unexpected. Peace. Because the crisis was not breaking us. It was strengthening us. That night, electricity flickered briefly during a storm. For a second, the house went dark. We all laughed softly in the sudden silence. Then the lights returned. It felt symbolic. Darkness can come quickly, but light returns when wiring is strong. And our wiring was becoming stronger. Later, Armin sat beside me. I used to think money was the biggest measure of success, he said. And now, I asked, now I think stability is. Sana joined us. And stability doesn't mean never facing problems, she added. It means facing them together. I looked at both of them. Their faces were tired, but steady. And in that moment, I realized something deeply. The tax letter had not come to punish us. It had come to reveal us, to show us whether we were still fragile or finally united. The roof repair began 2 days later. The sound of hammering echoed through the house, but it did not feel destructive. It felt constructive. Each nail driven into place felt like a promise that this house was not being preserved out of fear. It was being strengthened out of choice. As I stood in the doorway watching my son speak confidently with the workers, I felt tears rise quietly, not from sadness, from relief. My children had come home not just to rest, but to rebuild. And sometimes, storms are necessary to remind us what truly holds a family together. The roof was repaired within a week. The dripping stopped. The hallway was dry again. Life seemed steady on the outside, but inside me, something was unsettled. For years, I had carried a truth I never shared, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I thought protecting them meant silence. Now, watching my children grow into responsibility, I realized something important. They were no longer too young to understand, and secrets, even loving ones, can create invisible distance. That night, after dinner, I asked them to sit with me. My voice was calm, but my hands felt cold. There is something I should have told you a long time ago, I said gently. They looked at each other. Concern moved across their faces. What is it, Amy? Sana asked softly. I took a slow breath. When your father was offered that job abroad, the one he refused, it wasn't only because of his father's illness. Armin leaned forward slightly. What do you mean? I held their eyes carefully. It was also because of me. Years ago, when your father received that offer, he was excited. I remember the light in his eyes. He showed me the letter at this very table. He spoke about better schools, better hospitals, better future. He said, we can build something bigger. But I was afraid, not of the country, not of the language. I was afraid of losing everything familiar, afraid of starting from zero, afraid of being alone in a place where no one knew us. And I told him so. I don't think I'm strong enough for that, I said. He looked at me quietly, and then he folded the letter. He never mentioned it again. At the time, I believed he chose family over ambition. But the truth is, he chose my comfort over his dream. Sana covered her mouth. Armin's expression changed slowly. You never told us, he said. I didn't want you to think I held him back, I replied quietly. But did you? Armin asked carefully. The question was not accusing, just honest. I thought for a moment. Yes, I said finally. I think I did. The room felt still, heavy, but not angry. For years, when you both said I was afraid of change, you were right, I continued. I was. Sana's eyes filled with tears. Amy, I thought staying meant safety, I whispered. But sometimes staying can also mean fear. I looked at the photo of your father on the wall. I have asked myself many times, I continued softly, if he had gone, would he have been happier? Armin shook his head slowly. He loved this house, he said. Yes, I agreed. But he loved me too. And sometimes love asks for sacrifice. The problem is, sacrifice leaves quiet questions behind. Questions that echo in silence. For years, I said gently, I worried that maybe I taught you fear without meaning to. Armin stared at the floor. That's why I ran, he said quietly. I didn't want to become someone who stayed out of fear. Sana nodded slowly, and I thought leaving meant strength. I felt tears in my eyes. I never wanted my fear to shape your choices, I said. But maybe it did. There it was. Not blame, not guilt, just truth. Armin moved his chair closer to mine. Amy, he said gently. Abu made his own choice. Yes, I replied. But he made it for me. And we made ours for ourselves, he continued. We left because we wanted to prove something. Sana wiped her tears. We blamed you for holding us back, she whispered. But maybe we were just afraid of failing here. I looked at both of them, and suddenly I understood something clearly. We had all been running from fear, just in different directions. I need to say something else, I continued softly. When your father passed away, I blamed myself, not for his illness, but for the life he did not explore. I wondered if I had limited him. And when you both left years later, I thought it was my punishment for holding him back. The room grew very quiet. Armin reached for my hand. That's not true, he said firmly but gently. Sana leaned into my shoulder. We didn't leave to punish you, she whispered. I know that now, I said softly. But pain creates strange stories in the mind. For years, I carried guilt quietly. It made me hold tighter. It made me fear change more, because losing you both felt like confirmation that I had once already caused someone to give up a dream. But tonight, speaking this aloud, I feel lighter, not innocent, but honest, and honesty heals more than silence ever could. Armin looked thoughtful. You know what I think, he said. I think Abu would be proud right now. Why? I asked gently. Because you're not holding us back anymore. And we're not running away anymore. Sana smiled softly. And maybe the lesson isn't about leaving or staying. Maybe it's about choosing freely, she added. Yes, choosing freely. Not from fear, not from guilt, but from clarity. That night, we sat together longer than usual. No phones, no rushing, just three people untangling old knots. For the first time, I did not feel like the center holding everything together. I felt like part of a circle, equal, seen, and understood. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees. The house did not feel heavy anymore. It felt honest, and sometimes honesty is the strongest foundation of all. After that night of honesty, something felt lighter in the house. Not perfect, not magical, just lighter. Old misunderstandings no longer sat between us like closed doors. They had been opened, and fresh air was finally moving through. Armin focused deeply on his contract work. He seemed steadier now, more patient, less desperate to prove something. And Sana became quieter, not sad, just thoughtful. I could see her thinking about her life, about who she was becoming. One afternoon, while we were chopping vegetables together, she spoke. Amy, I got an offer. My hands paused slightly. What kind of offer? I asked gently. A marketing position, she replied. In the city. The word city floated in the air, not heavy this time, but significant. Is it good? I asked. She nodded. Yes, stable salary. Good team. Growth opportunities. I studied her face. There was excitement there, but also hesitation. When would you start? I asked. In 3 weeks. 3 weeks. The number felt familiar. I took a slow breath. And what are you thinking? I asked softly. She looked down at the cutting board. I don't know. Later that evening, she came to sit with me in the garden. The sky was pale pink. She folded her hands in her lap like she used to when she was nervous. I always thought leaving meant freedom, she said quietly. And now? I asked. Now I understand that freedom without roots feels empty. Her voice trembled slightly. I don't want to run again. You're not running, I said gently. This is a job, not an escape. She looked at me carefully. Would you feel abandoned if I leave? The question was honest and brave. I did not answer immediately because I wanted my response to be true. Years ago, yes, I said softly. But now, I understand something different. She waited. Children are not meant to stay frozen beside their parents, I continued. They are meant to grow, but growth should not erase connection. Her eyes filled. I'm afraid of repeating the past, she whispered. So am I admitted. The last time she left, she walked out quickly. Excited, confident, certain that the world was waiting for her. This time was different. Now she understood effort, bills, responsibility, loneliness, and that understanding had softened her pride. The choice in front of her was no longer about rebellion. It was about balance. The next day, she spoke to Armin. I overheard part of their conversation from the hallway. You should take it, Armin said. Really? She asked. Yes, don't stay because of fear. And you? She asked him quietly. I'm staying because I want to, he replied. Their words were calm, not competitive, not defensive, just honest. For the first time in years, they were not influencing each other out of pride. They were encouraging clarity. That night, we sat together again. Sana looked at both of us. I think I will accept, she said softly. The words hung gently in the air. I nodded. Then accept with peace, I replied. She looked relieved. You're not upset? She asked. No, I said. I would be upset only if you left without love. Armin smiled faintly. This time is different, he said. Yes, I agreed. It is. Over the next few days, Sana prepared quietly, updating documents, packing slowly, not in a rush, not as if she was escaping. She promised she would visit often, not as a promise made to comfort me, but as a decision made with intention. One afternoon, she hugged me tightly in the kitchen. Thank you for letting me choose, she whispered. I held her gently. Thank you for choosing with honesty, I replied. And in that moment, I realized something important. Control had once lived in my love. Now trust lived there instead. And trust feels lighter. The day she left was calm. No tears in the doorway. No heavy silence. Just quiet emotion. Her suitcase rolled gently across the floor. She hugged Armin first. Then me. I'm not leaving home, she said softly. I'm expanding it. I smiled. Yes, and this house will always be your anchor. She stepped outside. But this time, the door did not feel like it was closing on loss. It felt like it was opening on growth. When I returned inside, the house felt quieter again. But not empty. There is a difference. Empty feels abandoned. Quiet feels peaceful. Armin stood beside me. You're okay? He asked gently. Yes, I replied. Are you? I asked in return. He nodded. She needed this, he said. Yes, I agreed. And we needed to let her go the right way. That night, I sat in the garden alone. But the loneliness I once feared was not there. Instead, I felt something else. Pride. Not pride that my children stayed. Not pride that they returned. But pride that they learned. And that I learned too. Sometimes the greatest change in a family is not dramatic. It is quiet. It is choosing differently than before. And this time, we had chosen with open eyes. A week after Sana left for the city, the community center announced its annual gathering. It was a small tradition in our neighborhood. Simple, homemade food, plastic chairs, old friends sharing stories. In the past few years, I had attended alone. People would smile kindly. They would ask about my children, and I would answer carefully. "They're busy," I used to say, and the conversation would move on. This year felt different, not because my children were perfect, but because our story was no longer filled with silence. Armin insisted on coming with me. "You've gone alone long enough," he said gently. I did not argue. The hall was decorated with simple string lights. Neighbors I had known for decades greeted us warmly. Mrs. Farida smiled widely when she saw Armin beside me. "So, you've come back for good?" she asked playfully. "For now," he replied calmly, but his tone held something steady. Not embarrassment, not defensiveness, just honesty. I felt proud, not because he was standing next to me, but because he was standing confidently. During the gathering, the organizer made a small speech. Nothing formal, just gratitude for neighbors who helped maintain the community. To my surprise, he mentioned my name. "For years," he said kindly, "she has volunteered at the reading group, kept the garden tidy, and supported many families quietly." Applause followed, soft but sincere. I felt shy. I had never done those things for recognition. I had done them to stay busy, to stay connected. But when I looked at Armin, I saw tears in his eyes. "You never told us you did all this," he whispered. I smiled faintly. "There were many things we didn't tell each other," I replied. Later, as people ate and talked, a neighbor approached Armin. "You're lucky," the man said kindly. "Your mother is strong. Not everyone stays and builds like she did." Armin nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "I'm starting to understand that." Those words were quiet, but they reached me, and something inside me softened deeply. Not because I needed praise, but because my son was finally seeing the woman I had become, not just the mother he once argued with. Near the end of the gathering, something unexpected happened. One of the older neighbors stood up and spoke about family, about how many young people leave, about how parents wait. Then he said gently, "Coming home is not weakness. It is maturity." The room grew quiet. Not everyone understood the weight of that sentence, but Armin did. He looked at me, and for the first time, there was no pride between us, only respect. On the walk home, the air felt calm. Armin broke the silence. "I used to feel small coming back here," he admitted. "And now," I asked. "Now I feel grounded." We walked slowly, no rush. "I thought people would judge me," he continued. "But they don't. Most people are too busy fighting their own battles," I said gently. He smiled faintly. "I wish I had understood that earlier." "Understanding comes when it is ready," I replied. When we reached home, he stopped at the gate. "Ami," he said quietly, "I'm proud of you." The words were simple, but they carried years inside them. I felt my eyes fill, not with sadness, but with relief. "Thank you," I said softly. "And I'm proud of you too." Not because he stayed, not because he returned, but because he faced himself. And that is harder than facing the world. After he went to his room, I sat alone for a while, but it did not feel lonely. The gathering had revealed something important. Healing is not only private. Sometimes it shows itself in how we stand in front of others, without shame, without hiding. Years ago, I felt embarrassed telling neighbors my children had left. Now, I felt calm telling them my children had grown. Growth is not always upward. Sometimes it is inward. Before sleeping, I received a message from Sana. "How was the gathering?" she asked. I sent her a picture of the lights in the hall. "It was warm," I wrote. "I wish I was there," she replied. "You will be next year," I answered. And I believed it, because this time, distance did not feel like separation. It felt like expansion. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the word ungrateful. For years, I had whispered it in my heart, not loudly, not angrily, just quietly. But now I understood something. My children were never ungrateful. They were unfinished. And so was I. We had all been growing at different speeds. Now, we were finally walking at the same pace. It happened on an ordinary morning. The kind of morning that feels safe, predictable, calm. I woke before sunrise, as I usually did. The house was quiet. Armin was still asleep. I went to the kitchen, put water on the stove, and stood by the window. The sky was still gray. And then, a sharp pain spread across my chest. Not dramatic, not loud, just tight, heavy. I placed my hand against the counter. It will pass, I whispered to myself. But it didn't. The room felt slightly distant. The kettle began to whistle, and the sound felt too far away. I tried to take a deep breath. It felt shallow, incomplete. I don't remember walking to his door. I only remember leaning against it and knocking softly. Armin, I called. My voice sounded unfamiliar. He opened the door immediately. One look at my face, and his expression changed. What's wrong? My chest, I managed to say, and in that moment, the roles shifted. He was no longer the confused son. He was steady, alert, focused. He helped me sit down, called for a car, held my hand the entire time. It's okay, he kept repeating. It's okay. The hospital lights were bright, cold. They asked questions, attached wires, checked blood pressure. Armin answered everything quickly, clearly, without panic. He didn't let go of my hand, even when the nurse gently asked him to step aside. I'm staying, he said quietly, and I saw something I had never fully seen before. Not obligation, not guilt, love, unfiltered. While I rested in the hospital bed, Armin stepped outside to call Sana. I could hear his voice from the hallway. It's not severe, he said carefully. But you should know. There was silence on the other end. Then, I'm coming, Sana said. No hesitation. No excuses. I'll take the first bus. Armin tried to tell her it wasn't necessary, but she had already decided. The doctors said it was stress-related. Not a major heart attack, but a warning. Rest, they advised. Reduce stress, as if stress were a switch you could simply turn off. Armin sat beside me quietly. You scared me, he admitted softly. I reached for his hand. I scared myself too, I whispered. There was a pause, and then he said something that made my heart ache. I don't want to lose you before I fully fix things. I looked at him gently. There is nothing to fix, I said. There is only living better from now on. By evening, Sana arrived. Her hair was slightly messy, her face pale from worry. She walked quickly into the room. Emmy, her voice cracked. I had not heard that tone since she was a child. She rushed to my side and held my hand. I'm fine, I assured her, but her eyes were filled with tears. You always say that, she whispered. And I realized something. For years, I had hidden my pain, so they would not feel burdened. But hiding pain had also hidden vulnerability. And vulnerability is what allows closeness. That night, they both sat on either side of my bed. Not arguing, not distracted, not scrolling on their phones, just present. Sana adjusted my blanket. Armin checked the doctor's notes again. At one point, I opened my eyes and saw them speaking quietly to each other. About schedules, about responsibilities, about making sure I rested properly. No pride, no competition, just teamwork. And I felt something inside me heal that medicine could not reach. When the lights dimmed, Sana leaned closer. Do you ever feel lonely? She asked gently. The question surprised me. Yes, I answered honestly. But not in the way you think. She waited. I felt lonely when we were angry with each other, I said. I don't feel lonely when you are far, but loving. Her tears fell silently. I'm sorry for the years I misunderstood you, she whispered. I squeezed her hand. We were all learning, I replied. The next morning, the doctor cleared me to go home, with instructions, with medication, with reminders to rest. As Armin helped me into the car, and Sana walked beside us, I noticed something beautiful. There was no fear in their faces now, only care and determination. At home, they prepared my room carefully, moved things closer, adjusted pillows, made tea without me asking. For years, I had carried everything. Now, they were carrying me gently, not because they felt guilty, but because they wanted to. Later that evening, as I rested, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. We need to be more present, Sana said. We will, Armin replied. There was no dramatic promise, no emotional speech, just quiet commitment. And sometimes quiet commitment is stronger than loud declarations. As I lay there, I realized something deeply important. Illness has a strange way of revealing truth. It removes pride. It removes distraction. It shows who stands beside you when the ground feels unstable. And my children were standing beside me, not out of obligation, but out of love. They had not just come home physically. They had come home emotionally, and that was the true healing. Recovery is slower than illness. Illness arrives suddenly. Recovery asks for patience. For 2 weeks, the house moved at a different pace. Slower, softer. Armin handled groceries, cooking, and paperwork. Sana extended her stay in the city by working remotely for a few days each week. They created a schedule. Not because I asked, but because they wanted to. And every time I tried to get up and do something, one of them would gently say, "Please sit." At first, it felt uncomfortable. I was not used to being cared for. I had built my identity around being the strong one, the steady one. But strength has different forms. And this season was teaching me another version. One evening, we sat together without the television on. No distractions, just tea between us. Armin cleared his throat. We need to talk about the future, he said calmly. Sana nodded slowly. I sensed this conversation had been waiting. About what? I asked gently. About living arrangements, Sana replied. The air shifted slightly. Not tense, just serious. Armin spoke first. I've been offered a long-term contract here, he said. It's stable. It would mean staying. I looked at him carefully. And do you want to? I asked. He nodded. Yes, but not because of the hospital scare. He paused. I want to build something here, for myself. That distinction mattered. He wasn't staying out of fear. He was choosing with intention. Sana took a deep breath. My company wants me in this city permanently, she said. But I've been thinking. She looked at both of us. What if I find something closer? Not necessarily here, but nearby? The suggestion surprised me. You don't have to change your plans for me, I said immediately. This isn't about sacrifice, she replied gently. It's about balance. For years, our decisions had been emotional reactions. Leaving in anger, staying in guilt. Now, this felt different. Deliberate, measured, adult. Armin leaned forward slightly. I think home doesn't have to mean everyone under one roof forever, he said. But it also shouldn't mean emotional distance. Sana nodded. Yes, maybe home is not a place we cling to. Maybe it's a place we return to, I added quietly. They both looked at me, and something shifted again. This was no longer a mother guiding children. This was 3 adults building understanding. Sana spoke softly. When I first left, I thought independence meant doing everything alone. She looked down at her hands. But I confused independence with isolation, Armin added, and I confused pride with strength. Their honesty felt like sunlight, not harsh, just illuminating. And I said gently, confused control with protection. We all sat with that truth. No one defended themselves. No one blamed, just acceptance. Then Armin asked something unexpected. Amy, what do you want? The question caught me off guard. For years, my wants had been silent, hidden behind responsibility. I took my time answering. I want peace, I said finally. Not constant presence, not constant sacrifice. They listened carefully. I want you both to live fully, I continued. But I also want honesty. Calls that are not rushed. Visits that are not forced. Sana reached across and squeezed my hand. You have that, she said firmly. And more, Armin added. After that conversation, something settled. Not a final answer, but a direction. Armin would stay and build his career here. Sana would explore positions within reasonable distance. Not because she was afraid to leave, but because she valued connection. And I would allow myself to rest, to accept help, to live beyond the identity of sacrifice. As I looked outside at the quiet street, I realized something profound. Home had changed. It was no longer defined by who stayed or who left. It was defined by the quality of love that remained. My children had once left to find themselves. Now they were choosing how to belong. And belonging, I understood, is not about location. It is about intention. Before going to bed, Sana spoke quietly from the hallway. No matter where I work, this is still my safe place. Armin added gently, and I'm not running anymore. I smiled to myself. For years, I feared losing them. But you cannot lose what is rooted in love. You can only misunderstand it for a while. Now, understanding had finally arrived. Not perfectly, not permanently, but honestly. It was a quiet evening. The sun was low, casting a golden glow across the living room. Armin had finished his work early. Sana had returned for the weekend. The house smelled of freshly cooked lentils and warm bread. I sat at the dining table, watching them move around. Not rushing, not distracted, just present. There was laughter in their voices, small jokes, quiet corrections, the sound of familiarity settling into comfort. It was the first time in many years that the house felt completely alive. Armin poured water into glasses. Sana arranged the salad bowls carefully. I took the last loaf of bread out of the oven. For a moment, I paused and just watched. These were ordinary things, yet everything felt extraordinary. The years of misunderstanding, distance, and worry had been replaced by intention. Each action now carried awareness, care, and love. We sat down together. I looked at both of them. You know, I said gently, I used to think keeping you close meant controlling you. Sana nodded slowly. Armin looked quietly at his plate. I realize now, I continued. Home is not about keeping people in one place. It's about keeping them in your heart, and keeping your heart open to theirs. There was silence. Not uncomfortable, just understanding. Sana smiled faintly. Yes, she said softly. I understand now. Armin nodded. And I never realized how much being here really matters. I reached out and held their hands. Thank you, I whispered. Not just for being here physically, but for being present, for being honest, for being brave enough to come home with intention. Sana squeezed my hand. Armin leaned slightly closer. I should be the one thanking you, Amy, Armin said quietly, for always being steady, even when we were lost. I felt a lump in my throat. I did not cry, not loudly, just quietly, in the deepest part of my chest. That night, after dinner, we cleared the table together. No arguments, no frustration, no hurry. We sat on the sofa afterward, looking out at the garden. The trees swayed in the wind. The lights outside flickered gently. The sound of the crickets filled the air, and I realized something I had never fully understood before. Home is not about absence or presence. It is not about leaving or staying. It is about the choices we make, the effort we put into loving one another, the courage to return when things are broken. And my children had returned, not just to the house, but to the understanding, trust, and love that defines it. I leaned back and whispered to myself, "Years ago, I called you ungrateful, but you were never ungrateful. You were unfinished, and so was I. Now we are all learning together." The house was quiet, the air calm, the heart full, and I knew, finally, this is what it means to come home, not just to walls, not just to rooms, but to one another. And sometimes, that is the greatest miracle of all. The moment was simple, ordinary, yet extraordinary, because love had returned, because understanding had returned, because home had returned.